Hey, Sarah, thank you for joining us on our show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Likewise, thank you for being our guest today. We have a really interesting topic today that we wanted to talk to you about. Um, it is a new one for me, so I am super keen on diving straight into it.
Yes,
Um, Before we go ahead, would you mind introducing yourself for us?
sure. Well, I'm Sarah Elkins. I'm a Montana-based workplace communication trainer, and I've been known to do keynotes and workshops on the topics of storytelling and StrengthsFinder, which is a Gallup tool. So, as just a quick example, I spent nearly 20 years working in the public sector in a variety of government agencies. And what I realized toward the end was that the biggest frustration I had was miscommunication. And so many people go into coaching of some sort or another based on their own experience of learning and growth. So I know quite a few people who got very fit and healthy after being significantly overweight. They've lost 150 pounds and they go into nutrition and health coaching because they
Mm.
had that journey. Well, I went into communication training because I found all of my mistakes over the years and thought, wouldn't it be great if somebody could come in and just help people understand where they're getting in their own way? Wouldn't that be great? So that's why I ended up taking on, I have two business degrees, but it was my StrengthsFinder training that really changed things for me. I had always really gotten disgusted by assessments. They always seemed very
Mm.
self-limiting and labeling. And I actually had some employers over the years use them against me. I had one employer say, "Oh, that's why you can't do these details because you're a big picture thinker." Like that was such a bad thing. So
Oh, wow.
it wasn't until I experienced StrengthsFinder that I realized that these tools can actually be really, really helpful if they're presented in a way that is helpful and practical. So with StrengthsFinder, it's not, this is what's wrong with you. It's, this is what's right with you. This is
Mm.
how your brain naturally and intuitively approaches problem solving, projects, relationship building. Are you somebody who speaks the language of lots of words and research? Are you somebody who speaks the language of action? Are you somebody who speaks the language of a very task oriented thinker? Or are you somebody who speaks the language of relationships? And we're all a little bit of all of those things. But if we
Mm.
understand these things, this is why I got into this work, is because now I understand that I may speak fluent Italian and my husband may speak fluent German, but we have language that we can share.
StrengthsFinder, as you say, is that like a software? Or
No,
are you
it's an
saying as a
assessment.
generic
So
assessment? Okay.
it's a Gallup tool. So Gallup is the company that does all those polls on
Right.
employee engagement and wellness and political polls. And they have a tool called StrengthsFinder, or CliftonStrengths is how it's referred to now. And
Mm.
you get onto their website, you purchase the assessment, and you answer a whole bunch of questions, and it spits out reports. And it's similar in the question asking to Myers Briggs or DISC or Enneagram, all those assessments that are out there. The
Mm.
difference is how it's presented, and that's why I like it. I find it to be highly accurate, and I like that it's all about what you do well and where sometimes you get in your own way because your brain thinks this way and it's different from how other people think.
Gotcha. This is really interesting because you reminded me of something. I know a lot of companies in Australia also choose um, a way of what is it called? Psychometric testing and
Hmm.
personality tests. And I don't know about other people, but I personally find, like you said, they're limiting. And I don't think
Hmm.
it brings out the way I may be in a particular situation. I may say something as an answer to the question posed because they are so like narrow focused. And I'm like, but I would be completely different if this situation falls on me in a workplace. I don't know. Or what I may do at a personal level. It's different. And I don't know how Myers-Briggs, and I feel Myers-Briggs, I feel, is also a bit um flawed in that sense because I don't think it picks up
Agreed.
someone's
I
personality
think it's too
different.
situational, right?
It's too situational, yeah, and
Hmm.
we may not even get those situations, which is so it's super
Right.
interesting to me what you were saying. I want to check this tool out. Do you mind sending me a link as well? Because I would love to put that on our YouTube page.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to. I
Um,
think you'll appreciate it, even though it's hard to take it, especially if you're a deep thinker. If you get into analysis paralysis because you collect so much information, then it's hard because they only let you have 20 seconds per question. But during a coaching call just the other day, it was somebody who has what's called analytical in their top talents. There are 34 of these themes. And we look at your top five or six to understand really your intuitive approach to problem solving.
yeah,
Well, this person has analytical as her number one talent, which means eh, she's likely going to be pretty skeptical about a tool like this because this is somebody that sees patterns, intuitively understands data. They can look at something and those patterns just pop into their heads and they don't even know how their brain is working so fast, but their brain picks up cues from data very quickly. And one of the things I said to her was, well, if Google can predict your behavior,
yeah,
so can Gallup. And the thing that made it clear for her was as I was describing her talents, she realized how custom this was, that this isn't a horoscope. This isn't all the people born between these days are going to be like this. It's not like that. And she also realized that all those questions where you come against them and it's on the scale kind of answers where you say agree or disagree or no um no determinant or undecided, sorry. And she said, well, it was frustrating because sometimes the question they would both resonate with me or neither of them would resonate with me. And it didn't make any sense. So I had to answer neutral. And I said, well, there are 34 talents and some of them had to end up in the middle.
mm,
That's why there are so many that you answer neutrally. But when you feel strongly about something, that's when it pops up to the top or to the bottom.
yeah, it's super interesting. Going back to the point that you made when you introduced yourself, Sarah, you said that there were things you wish you would have known or somebody there helping you with communication. I have gone through the same thinking. I'd love to know from you, do you remember of any instances that come to your mind?
Oh, so many.
Would you
So
like to share them with us?
I would love to. I would love to start with I can see, and I've talked to my mother about this and my siblings, I can see some of my talents showing up as early as 6 or 8 years old.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And then I probably went through a period where they would have been a little wishy washy because I was being highly influenced by the way other people were doing
Of
things.
course.
So I was
Yeah.
exploring, experimenting with my identity and my approach to things. But then I came back to my own talents in my probably mid to late 30s and started to really embrace them. So
Yeah.
one of my talents is called command. And it is exactly what you would think it is. And as a girl growing up in the 80s, my teen years were in the 80s, all I wanted to be was nice and sweet, but I was bossy.
Mm.
And my family called me bossy, and bosses over the years, only the men, called me bossy. But command as a talent, this is where I would have loved to have had this tool and a coach earlier on in my life. Command as a talent is that it's presence. So when I walk into a room for a meeting, oftentimes people just assume that I'm leading the meeting. It's a
Mm.
presence, it's a lack of tolerance for chaos. So when I walk into a room with my mother and her twin sister and her siblings, I immediately get to work. I put people to work because they have this chaotic energy. And
Yeah, you just
I
see
don't
it. You
have
see it clearly.
I do, and I just can't tolerate it.
Yeah.
So that's what command looks like. And there were times where I would be in a meeting and people would assume I was the boss, even though my boss is sitting next to me. And I would end up stepping on toes in the meeting, kind of taking over the meeting. And there are ways that you can manage that and still show up fully as yourself. And in this situation, for instance, I had a wonderful relationship with the boss where we were doing pretty intense meetings with faculty and staff, registrars and admissions officers with the colleges and universities all over Montana. All of them were represented in these meetings. And the first couple of meetings, I would walk in and my boss would wax poetic about the project. And he would talk and ask a lot of questions and get everybody at the table talking. And I would just be itching, waiting for something to get done. I would I would be bleeding from my tongue, thinking, okay, where's the action item? Where's the agenda? Let's get this done. But he was, and I can look back now and see his talents were things like includer and harmony, the relationship
Yeah.
building talents. He knew that everyone had to have some level of buy-in before we were going to accomplish any of our goals. But I was in there like a
Mm.
bull in a china shop. Let's get things done, right?
Yeah.
So once I realized that this was not going to work out very well for me, it was not going to end well. I mean, he was my boss. It was not going to end well. I remember being in the car with him on our way to one of these big meetings. And I said to him, Bill, what's your goal for this meeting? How do you want this to end? What do you want people to be thinking about or feel at the end of this meeting? He said, I just want everybody to feel like they have a place at the table, that their words matter,
Mm.
that their thoughts about this
Mm.
project matter. And I said, oh, okay. So we went into the meeting and I noticed that that's what was happening. People felt like they belonged, they felt like they were getting some words in. The
Mm.
next meeting, I did the same thing. And I said, what's your goal for this meeting? And he said, well, I'd like to get through this list of courses, figure out which ones are equivalent, which ones are unique. But there are 200 courses in this list. I don't know if that's going to happen. And I said, tell you what, Bill, why don't you introduce the meeting and tell everybody the
Mm.
goal, and then I'll
Mm.
take over the facilitation because I can get
Okay.
us through this list. And he's like, okay, we can try it that way. We got through the list, the entire list. And I
Perfect.
was
Okay.
just like a machine, and everyone felt like they belonged there because he had already set the stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the end of those meetings, almost every time people would say, oh my gosh, that was the most productive meeting I've ever attended. And it was because we figured out who did what and what we were good at,
Mm.
and we were able, each of us
Mm.
shined in our own way to make that team really work. That's what I wish I knew earlier in my career.
Wow, that is, a lot of what you said I can relate to as well because I'm very similar. And and I sort of have to tell myself to take I am quite like I'll listen and I think where I feel it becomes a bit difficult for me is the chaos part when I see nothing is being done. Like attending meetings after meetings with no clear agenda or why are we there? I would rather have a cup of tea or, I would rather do something
Let's
else.
go for a walk.
I got exactly. And I feel like not everyone is always on that page. And I've recently had this sort of scenario. Um, I love to respect everybody and I love how we are all different humans and we think differently. But I feel like I would love to be more adept at the strategies to kind of go, what can I do differently? which you beautifully figured out that, okay, I sort of worked on the strengths and you had an open chat with the manager, but sometimes manager may not want that and they may not be great at communication as much as you may be. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so that can create a lot of conflict between people, even though I'm trying to do the right thing, but that person is not receptive of that. And they rather see it, are you trying to teach me my job? No, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to be productive and make it productive for everybody else.
Hmm.
I've actually recently gone through a very similar situation like that. I'd love some strategies of you in this podcast on how somebody like us who is trying to make things work for them and appreciating everyone's time. I think that's a key that a lot of people forget these days,
Hmm.
is respecting someone's time who is attending those meetings. How do we approach things? Your way of it was, obviously, you looked at the strengths and you had a great banter with your manager and you were able to achieve it. Are there other strategies that you could share with us that can really help our listeners?
Absolutely. One of the things that happened that helped me realize that communication was the thing that I needed to focus on was
Yes.
I mentioned I had a boss that was mean to me, the whole,
Yep.
oh, you're a big picture thinker and
Yep.
very rude.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
we had a lot of conflict in our relationship. Our project went well. I mean,
Yep.
it was an award-winning project, but every day I came home feeling awful. And my confidence just tanked because our relationship was so
Mm,
filled with conflict and tension. I remember
yeah.
one time walking into the bathroom and just crying, and I'm not a crier. So
Mm,
it was bad enough that I was crying at work, and that is not something that would normally happen with me. I remember standing in the bathroom, looking in the mirror, tear-stained face, and I'm trying to splash some cold water on my face so that my boss doesn't know that I was crying before I walk out. And I looked in the mirror and I realized I've been here before. This is a
mm,
pattern. This is not the first time I've had this kind of relationship with a person at work, particularly a boss. So, identifying your own patterns, understanding where you are part of the problem. I did not deserve to be bullied. Nobody does. And I was definitely
yeah.
being bullied. At the same
Yeah, right.
time, I realized that in some ways I had put myself into this position and was antagonizing my bully. I didn't have to do that either. So, understanding your own patterns is going to be the key to being able to undo them if you choose. If you choose.
Mm,
Now, I can see the patterns and decide, well, that's just who I am, and I'm good with that, and I'm just going to live with it. Or I can say, okay, I don't want to keep living with this struggle. And every time I have this, it's going to just keep coming back because I haven't dealt with it. I
mm,
haven't figured out how to manage it.
yep.
So one of the things to do, I we've heard of the phrase managing up when we have a manager
Mm,
that doesn't necessarily appreciate what we bring to the table or
yep.
they're micromanaging. One of the things that I've found when I'm guiding my coaching clients on teams is that asking questions is often the better way of approaching it. And I mean asking questions with genuine curiosity so that
Mm,
you can uncover the other person's strengths and how their brain works. So I mentioned I'm a storyteller and a storytelling coach. I do a lot of this work with people who are applying for jobs and getting interviews. Asking the right questions helps you understand your audience. So, for instance,
right.
if we were going to work together and we were going to start a project together, I might ask you, how did the last time you went traveling, how did you get ready for your trip? What are some of the things you did? Did you pack a week before? Did you pack that morning? Did you research the
Mm,
location where you're going to be? Did you plan everything to the minute? Are you a fly by the seat of your pants kind of traveler? When I get answers to those questions, I can then understand better what your language is. If you say, I was packed 3 days in advance, I had laid out all my clothes, I had my kids' clothes laid out, I had all the travel arrangements in my folder printed, ready to go. And I would think, okay, this person wants everything to be in routine. They prefer to have a lot of or very little uncertainty. They know there's going to be some, but they really prefer to have where somebody like me, I fly by the seat of my pants. I plan if other people are involved, but if it's just me, I just go.
Mm,
So knowing
same.
that helps you, right? Um, for instance, when I understand that about you, I'm going to realize that before we do any project work, you're going to need to collect as much information as you can. If you're that kind of person that plans and packs that way, you probably are also a collector of information,
Mm,
probably deep research about where you're going. So I'm not going to expect you, my expectations are not going to be that you can fly by the seat of your pants alongside me. My
yep.
expectations are going to be, I'm going to have to be more clear about what I'm doing to make sure that it doesn't seem uncertain or impulsive to you.
How would you handle, say, and I'm going to take this to a probably a leadership question more so, that you've got a leader who isn't a great communicator and they just looks like they're confusing things and they are just creating chaos. And it could be intentional, could be unintentional, you know, whatever the case may be, but that's how it presents itself. Um, what other communications strategies, can they apply?
One of the things that always comes up is, do we just leave? When we have a leader that
Yeah,
doesn't get it, there are times
exactly.
where you just have to call it quits. You just have to say to yourself, this is not going to change. This person is going to stay here. They're not going to retire or move or change jobs. Is this a deal breaker for my
Yeah,
health and my
yep,
mental health and my career? Because
yep,
is your career going to get stymied because you're stuck with a leader that
yep,
doesn't value you or develop you?
yeah,
So that's always a
100%, yep.
question that you have to ask yourself. The other question is, can you develop systems to help that person lead better? So, for instance, having check ins, weekly check ins. If you can insist on having weekly check ins with an agenda, a very clear agenda, it's the same every week. First thing on the agenda is to talk about what was accomplished recently or in the last week and what's still ongoing.
Mm,
Are there any resources you need from that leader? Have they answered the questions that you need answered before you can continue to work on that project? Have all the
yep,
resources been exhausted? Asking those questions, but having it be a standard agenda for every week and documenting it. So everything is in writing.
mm,
Here's the agenda. I'm typing my answers, and then you email the notes from the agenda saying, okay, this is what I understood to be the action items and the deadlines. And they respond, yes, that's what I wanted. That just generates a very solid routine and transparency. And
yeah,
most
interesting.
leaders that don't do those things and won't do those things, it's because they don't want to be held accountable. So this
That is so true,
forces
though.
them to be held accountable, right? That, well, you made this
Yep,
decision and this is the direction we went. And
yep,
you said this on this day. I have it in writing and you agreed to that. So
yep.
they're less likely to change things and lie
Their
if you
minds,
have
yeah.
it back and forth in this document, a shared document that shows exactly what you discussed each week.
That is very cool. And it's so true, actually. It's so true.
Hmm. And
Um,
I'd also say that in email, we have a tendency to do too much email, not enough talking, like face to face and over the phone.
yep,
There are some bosses, if you know you need to document everything, just document everything. Don't do anything over the phone. But if it's a colleague that you know the intent is there that's good, then going
yeah.
over and knocking on their door or their cube wall or picking up the phone and saying, hey, that email you sent, it felt a little abrupt. Are we okay? Can you imagine how much less drama we would have in our workplaces if we just did that?
Mm,
If we just said,
absolutely.
hey, that email, it came across, it was in all caps. Are we okay? Did I do something wrong? Is there something I need to fix here? Usually the person will say, oh no, I was just in a hurry, caps lock was on. Or sometimes they might say, I was just really frustrated because I've told you this a few times and it still
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be sticking. I really need you to do it this way. Then you say, oh, okay,
Mm,
thanks for being direct with me. And then you make yourself a sticky note and you stick it to the desk to say, I'm not going to forget this
don't
again.
do it again. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because she
Absolutely.
told me and she honored me with her honesty. She gave
Mm,
me this gift of saying, actually, yeah, this is really bothering me.
yeah.
I'm going to try to fix that because I respect this person or I know that she's doing her best. Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be great to just have those
Honesty,
conversations?
100%. Isn't honesty a rare skill these days? I feel as well. It's not. I feel like it's like a an expensive piece of jewelry. I feel you wear. Like it doesn't.
So I'm
But
going to
then you
tell
got to
you a
carry
quick
it.
if you don't mind, I'll share a quick story about where this really,
No,
really comes
please.
in. So I was
Yeah,
working
please do.
with some clients that were they were very frustrated with each other. It was the manager and the supervisor and the employee.
Yeah.
And the employee has all those talents that make it sound like she's speaking Italian. She has the
Mm,
gestures, she has all the words, and she's enthusiastic and she's happy. Like she has that positivity talent. So she has this level of energy that's just everybody needs somebody like this on their team. Well, her boss has all of the hardcore get it done, give me the information, give me the action items. And I describe her as speaking fluent German. And
mm,
neither of them speak the other person's language. So when I
mm-hmm.
walked into their team meeting, I could feel the tension. And I realized that they're not speaking the same language, but they don't know it. So I sat with the two of them. Thank goodness the boss was eager to learn how to speak this
That's
language.
awesome.
How it wasn't
Yeah.
going to change her. She wasn't going to suddenly be all flowery with their language. That will
Yeah.
never happen to this woman. But
Yeah.
she wanted to make sure that her employee knew that she cared about her because they both thought that
Mm,
they didn't like each other. Oh, she doesn't like
mm,
me. She hates me. She thinks I'm this, she thinks I'm that. So I got them together and I said, you are speaking fluent Italian. You are speaking fluent German. When an email comes across that looks like it's abrupt, it's just bullet points, and Cheryl forgot to say good morning to you in the email. How was your weekend? And she went straight into the bullet points of the stuff to get done that week. Instead
mm.
of being hurt, you can come and knock on the door. Excuse me, do you have just a minute? This came across as a little abrupt. I want to just make sure we're good because I can get this done. I just want to make sure we're good and that I'm not missing something.
Mm.
And then the other woman said, well, sometimes she comes to me and she's so enthusiastic and all this energy and all these ideas. And it's kind of like she's vomiting on me, all this excitement.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I can't tolerate that. It feels overwhelming to me. So how do I give her a cue? And we had this great discussion about saying sometimes Cheryl's not your audience for that excitement.
Mm,
Sometimes if you need to externally process, find somebody else that can listen and just listen and be there. And then filter down your top three and either come and talk to her about those top three ideas or write her an email as bullet points.
mm.
And it's not going to change you. You're not going to suddenly become German, but you are going to
Yeah.
learn please and thank you in that language.
We were going to talk about storytelling, and I'm sorry I've kind of gone onto a tangent because it was so exciting talking to you, and I was like, yeah, I'd love to pick your brain on those things. Do you mind talking to me about when you say storytelling, what do you mean by that, and how that can benefit?
Well, we can actually blend the two conversations really seamlessly. One of my taglines is your strengths are your stories. So, as somebody who is around the proverbial water cooler at work. You're
Yeah.
visiting with
Yep.
people at work. If you can
Yep.
tell a story that demonstrates what you're good at, then if an opportunity comes up, people know who to recommend for it. So, for
Mm,
instance, if you are, let's say you're an analyst and you're really good with numbers and you're really good at picking out um, patterns and understanding the data and maybe even translating from very complex language to simple language for people to understand. Maybe that's what you're
mm,
really good at. And that's what your job
mm,
really entails. But let's say you're also a really good teacher and you would like to get into the training aspect of whatever you're doing because you want
mm,
to get away from your desk sometimes and you want to explore that possibility and that talent. They're not going to just put you in a training position because you say, I'm a good trainer. But what if at home you are teaching your kid how to read,
mm,
or you're a coach for Little League, or you in your past taught courses at the local tech college? But they don't know that because maybe it's on your resume, but your colleagues don't read your resume. So if you're standing around talking at a networking event or in the break room or at a Zoom call where you're just doing a check-in and you say, oh my gosh, I just ran into one of my former students from when I taught tech school. I taught computer classes at this tech school, and she's doing all these amazing things. It's like, it was so good to run into her. What is that colleague going to say? Wait, you teach? Oh yeah, I love it. It's such meaningful work to me. That is
that is pretty cool.
storytelling.
That is storytelling and very cool marketing as well, I must say, of your skill set. What a great idea.
It's if you
Gotcha.
want to move into different careers, if you're in one industry and you want to switch industries, people
Yep.
have to know what you're good at and not specific to an industry.
Mm, I never thought it like that. I love the proverbial water cooler conversation.
Not many people stand around a water cooler anymore.
Yeah, true. True. Well, do you remember a particular instance where you thought storytelling is so important in people's career and it can take you from 0 to 100, probably in a
For
shorter
sure.
time frame?
There were a couple of specific incidents that brought me here. So the name of my book and podcast are Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And when I first started coaching, I was just coaching people for communication purposes. And I had
Yep.
taught customer service workshops and I had done a couple of keynotes on communication. And I had this client and she had been diagnosed with MS and she was a motivational speaker. And
Right.
she called me and she scheduled some sessions with me. And I said, "So you're already speaking. What do you what do you need from me?" And she said, "Well, I don't I don't want to talk about my diagnosis." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "I don't want to be known as that woman with MS." Oh yeah, she's that speaker that has MS. And I said, "Lacey, that's not at all how I perceive you.
Mm,
The way you speak, what I perceive in you is your resilience, your persistence, your grit. It's not the diagnosis that defines who you are, it's how you're managing it, how you talk about it."
mm,
And it was after that call that I realized it's not the story, it's how you tell it.
mm.
So that was the first incident. And the next one was when I was on an interview committee for a couple of positions with the organization that I was working with at the time. And I had been following a guy named Lou Adler on LinkedIn. And he offers this really awesome question, the only question you need to ask in an interview, which is, tell me about a significant accomplishment. And when somebody tells you about something that is a significant accomplishment, you can pull all kinds of information from them about who they are and what they value.
Oh,
And when
wow.
I asked
Right.
that, It's amazing. It's a powerful, powerful question, especially if you know what you're looking for. If you're looking for
Mm.
somebody who is a great team player, who is really going to integrate into your team, and they tell the story about how they lost 100 pounds by themselves, and they don't include any other characters in that conversation, in that story, they're probably not going to be somebody that's going to integrate well into your team.
Oh, oh, really? Wow. Just one question giving you that much
One
info.
question. So when I asked that
Never
question,
thought
I
about
had to
that.
ask, it's really powerful. I had, because I worked in the public sector, government agencies,
Yeah.
I had to ask
Yeah.
that question in the same way to every person we interviewed. Because
Right.
that's HR law in Montana, well, across the US, is that you have to level the playing field by asking the same question to every candidate.
Yep. Yep.
And my colleagues that were on this committee had never used that question, of course, because they have the list of questions. And when I asked that question the first time, I remember the people around the table listening differently to the other questions than from the other questions. And the person who answered it, I remember this because it was so meaningful. The guy said, well, I'm 35 and I just finished my degree. And so I was a non-traditional age student and I have two little kids at home. And when I walked across that stage and got my diploma, I felt like that was a really big accomplishment. I was studying and going to school and working full time through the entire degree program. And my wife was a total rock star. She is the reason I was able to do it because she was taking care of the kids and she was making meals and doing the grocery shopping. I was so focused on my degree, and she was a rock star for me.
Wow.
And I thought, this is the guy. This is who we want on our team.
What if somebody researches this question before coming for the interview and they're well prepared? Would you still be able to, look through what you are wanting to look through in those
Of
answers?
course. Yes. Well, I would. I would because that's what I do for a living. I ask questions.
Cool. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I could because I pull different pieces. So when I'm hosting somebody on my podcast and I'm interviewing them, they'll
Yep.
tell a story and I will pick one little thread that they kind of threw away. And I'll
Yep.
say, oh,
Yep.
wait a minute, let's go back a little bit. When I heard you say this is what I was imagining. Is that accurate? And they'll stop and think, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. Wow,
Yeah.
that was not part of my story. And I'll say, well, it needs to be. This is a
Yeah.
really important part of that pivotal moment in your story. This is the part that you share. This is the part that you
Mm.
uncover and include the other characters because this is the part that tells me who you are and what matters to you.
This is, yeah, really, really cool. And I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel that the power of storytelling linked with, like you said before, us asking the right questions. It's not just the career pathway, but it's also that it will help us build great friendships and relationships along the way, probably for the longer term. Would I be
That
correct in
is very
understanding that as well?
insightful. Absolutely. You're going to attract your the people who gravitate to you based on your stories are the people you want in your life.
Yeah,
And I think I love that you pulled up
for sure.
this other aspect of storytelling, which is story listening.
Mm,
I can't pull that thread if I'm not really listening. If I'm thinking about my own story that I'm so
yes.
excited to share because you just shared something that reminded me of my own thing, I am not going to listen the same way.
Mm,
So you're right. Being a good story listener is probably 75% of being a good storyteller. Sometimes you have to notice things while you're telling a story You notice body language. Am I losing her? She just looked at her watch twice in a few seconds. I think I'm losing her. What do I do next? How do I wrap this story up and then ask her a question? Watching your audience, making sure that you are sharing the right story at the right moment. So, as an example, years ago, I was with my family, my brother and
Mhm.
sister and nieces, and our two boys were there with me. And I remember I was sharing a story with my 10-year-old niece. This was probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I'm
Mhm.
sharing this story with her. And my brother came over to me and he said, "Sarah, land the plane." And I realized that I had lost my niece minutes before. Her feet were facing the wrong direction. Her feet weren't even facing me.
Oh.
She was trying to be polite, but she was backing
No.
away and her feet were kind of pointing the other direction. And I thought, oh, I totally messed that up. So that's another way, the story listening. This is another lesson as a communication professional that is going to change your life.
Um, a few strategies from your side. How could we, as ordinary people in our corporate world or in our work or just our realms of life, we can be a better storyteller?
There are a few things. First, being intentional about the stories you share is helpful.
Hmm. Hmm.
Second, notice which stories you're sharing. So, for instance, there's always somebody that's a complainer, right? And you don't ever want to be that one.
Oh.
Sometimes you need to vent. There are times where you need to vent, but if you are venting every day or even twice a week, that's how you're known as the complainer. And people don't really want to spend time with you. And if they
Mm,
do, it's because they're enjoying that negative feedback loop, and it's going to
right.
drive that toxicity into wherever
Mm,
you are, whether it's at work or at home or among your friends. So paying attention to the stories you're sharing in that way and noticing things in a daily basis that you can tell stories about.
mm,
So when I'm working with my coaching clients, we create a story collection document. I call it a story portfolio. And we have a variety of categories for each story. So we have categories like demonstrates my skill at A, demonstrates this character value. So demonstrates my um, uh, the fact that I want to be known as a considerate person. So demonstrates that I'm a considerate person.
mm,
Demonstrates my team, my that I'm great at working with a team. So having those categories so that when you have certain stories in your collection that fit within those categories, you always know which story to share and when.
hmm.
If you just start collecting those, and they don't have to be the epic moments in time, it's even more important that they're not the I almost died or I met a celebrity story. It's way more important that you say something like, yesterday, when I came home from a client appointment, I was walking through my yard because I noticed that things were greening up. And I live in Montana, which it stays cold for a while. And I
Yeah,
remember
yeah, yeah.
walking to the front of my yard, and there was the first bright blue crocus popping up in my garden.
Oh.
And it felt so good to see signs of life and spring. That's a story. It's not epic, it's just a moment in time, but you learned a lot about me in less than 30 seconds.
Very interesting.
And
Mm,
it doesn't have to be work stories, even at work. And so the next thing I would say is make sure you're sharing stories that you're comfortable sharing. I would never ask somebody who is very shy or doesn't show a lot of emotion at work. I would never expect them to share a story that's going to make them cry. If that's not, because that's not going to feel authentic to you. And people feel that if you're not being authentic, if you're not
oh, yeah.
sharing something that feels right to you, all you're going to do is make everybody uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah,
So share the
100%.
stories
Yeah.
that fit, right?
Mm,
That feel right.
yeah,
Does that answer your
yeah.
question?
It does. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sarah, from your perspective and your experience, do you have a recent example that you could share with us as we are really excited to know what you do and how you do it?
Well, yes. Thank you for asking. So the majority of my income comes from StrengthsFinder coaching. I'm actually
Hmm.
working with this great team of over 300 engineers right now to integrate that tool into their daily processes. Recently, though, I had the opportunity to host a 90-minute breakout session at a women's conference in Bozeman, Montana. There were three breakout sessions happening at the same time. They were listed as 90-minute workshops. And the room where I set up, it was about storytelling for professional development and advocacy. And every seat was taken in my breakout
Hmm.
session. So there were
Hmm.
50 women in this room. And there was a moment where somebody said, "Oh my gosh, I just didn't realize how my stories can make it really clear what matters to me." And at the end, I had forgotten to sell my book. I had a box full of my books behind me, but I had just said, "Thank you, everybody enjoy lunch." And one of my colleagues in the room said, "Wait, tell us about your book." Because I'd completely forgotten to do the sales part of my breakout session. And I said, "Oh, yes, I have this book. It's called Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will." And it's kind of a workbook with exercises so you can start collecting your stories, the ones that demonstrate the values and the skills that you want people to know about you. So I have this book for sale. And then another woman that is a former coaching client stood up. She said, "Wait, I need to just tell everybody, if you're looking for a coach, particularly StrengthsFinder with your team, but even if you're just looking for an individual coach, she's the best. I worked with her for 6 months. And if you're looking, just give her a call, check in with her." And I remember this moment of my heart kind of aching because
Mm.
I didn't need I didn't need to sell myself. Having my clients tell my story was way more powerful than me saying, "Oh, by the way, I'm a communication coach and this is what I do." The kicker for this entire event was that as women were leaving the room to go to lunch, there was a line of women to get my book and to ask me to sign it. But almost everyone who left reached in for a hug.
That is so sweet. Mm.
It took it took us a half hour to get out of the room because everyone was hugging each other and
Yeah.
hugging me. And these are all
Yay.
mostly strangers that ended up in this room together. So that was, I still think about it. You can tell I'm still processing that experience.
Mm.
But there was this warmth, there was this creation of a safe and welcoming and nurturing environment in that room. And every woman felt it.
Well, from the sounds of it, it's a great skill that I feel as humans need to have to make an impact for ourselves and for society in general. Um, Sarah, before I let you go, would you mind telling us where we can find you, our audience, and I will put that information on our YouTube page as well.
Sure, thank you. Elkinsconsulting.com is the easiest way to find all of my links. So there's a link to my podcast. You can listen to my podcast anywhere that podcasts are. Um, and you can get to my book. You can get to my audiobook at elkinsconsulting.com. If you really enjoyed this, I would love for you to connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where I spend the majority of my social media time, which is not a lot, but LinkedIn is my favorite platform.
Yeah, perfect.
And as a matter of fact, my 5-year anniversary of my book is coming up. May 31st is 5 years. So
Oh,
starting in a
yay!
couple weeks, I'm doing a special promotion. I have some copies of my book here in my house. And so I'm offering for $25 to get a signed copy that I'll ship to you. And it also includes a 20-minute bullseye story session. So, for the listeners, if you want to come up with a story or two that you can use, whether you're at the proverbial water cooler or interviewing, or you're going to be on a podcast, we can come up with a story or two for you to use in that 20-minute bullseye story session.
That is perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm definitely going to get my copy. I'm going to do that. And also, I will get all that information up on our YouTube page as well as soon as this episode goes live. Thank you once again for taking us through communication strategies. And also, we talked about working with difficult bosses and how we can sort of try to work the situation for ourselves or for our benefit. And most importantly, the power of storytelling and the benefits it brings to us as people, as working professionals, and as leaders. So I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining our podcast.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you for the honor.